Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Diana Conway. I am president of the Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club, and thank you all for joining us tonight to hear from Montgomery County's own Adam Ortiz, the EPA administrator for the Mid-Atlantic, meaning us. Before I introduce our speaker, let me run through a couple of housekeeping items. First, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the Latino Democratic Club of Montgomery County and the newly elected club president, Omar Laza, who's joining us tonight. So congratulations to you, Omar, on your new perch, and we look forward to working with the Latino Democratic Club. Quick word about Women's Democratic Club. If we could get the next slide. Yeah, thanks. So we've been around for 60 years, and we do a number of activities that we try to serve the community with. We organize speakers like tonight's event. We have community education panels, which tend to be more regionally focused. We run candidate forums and get out the vote activities, especially in collaboration with sister organizations. And we also host happy hours with a purpose, and we will be returning to those. Those are in-person events, obviously more casual mingling. And we have a sturdy dose of advocacy on issues that disproportionately affect women and children. So if you are passionate about an issue that we cover, join us in advocating at the state and county level. And if we're not already working in the area that matters to you, come and talk to us, and let's see if there's room for us to collaborate. Let's see, did we get the committee slide? Yes, so these are the hardworking committees that do the actual work that I'm talking about. And then our executive committee. And these are the elected officials for Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club. And this list of 6, plus the past president, will be turning over at our June meeting when we have our biannual elections. I'll have a word to say about that in a minute. Couple of our recent speakers. We just had Mr. Leggett come and talk about the blueprint. We had Comptroller Brooke Learman speaking about the budget that she's inherited and working with the new governor. And as you can see, most of these programs are on our WDC YouTube channel and also on our website. So upcoming events, on May 7th, we're having an in-person happy hour in North Potomac. If you RSVP, you'll get the address, and it is featuring the Women's Legislative Caucus, which is newly energized and led by District 39's own Delegate Leslie Lopez, so she's the chair of the Women's Legislative Caucus and promptly put them on the map by taking a position on women's reproductive rights. So we're going to celebrate them, and we'll have a number of elected officials joining us as well from all over the state, not just Montgomery County. So come, bring your questions and your issues for policy, and come and join with some friends. That's May 7th, and if you go to our website, you can sign up to join us there and get the address. Let's see, yes, the upcoming speakers, May 10th, we'll have Representative David Trone. He's from District 6, and that's organized by Programs Chair Barbara Zelenko. You may know District 6 was redrawn 2 years ago, and the congressman got an extra 140,000 Republicans, but he still prevailed 55 to 45, which is no small feat, and has been a real bipartisan coalition builder on public health issues like addiction and mental health and education. And June 14th, our community education chair, Gloria Aparicio, has secured a terrific speaker to talk about the Juneteenth celebration. And the idea here is we're having it on the 14th to really educate our community about the significance so that when the 19th comes, we are well positioned to recognize its importance in our American history. The June date for our biannual meeting and elections, we're waiting to hear from a speaker that we are pursuing. And as soon as we have that date, we will secure a venue and share out the details. And as always, we ask for your suggestions in coming up with more speakers. So before I bring in our guest and introduce him, I want to invite you to look at the bottom of your screen, and where it says chat, all the names that are listed, that are present here will be listed. If you go down to the one that's labeled Q&A and put your question in there, it will be handled by our crack team led by our treasurer, Mary Lou Fox. The job descriptions on this board don't always end at the edge of the job description. So go ahead and put everything into the chat. And are there any elected officials? Sorry, I think we were expecting a couple. Not yet. Okay, thank you. All right, so on to the show tonight. Thank you ahead of time for putting your questions into Q&A. I just want to remind you that the chat is open. You're welcome to put anything in there that you would like. So our guest tonight, Adam Ortiz, is the Regional Administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency. It's hard to believe, but you've already been there 18 months. Before that, Mr. Ortiz was head of the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection for over 4 years, running a 200-person agency overseeing clean energy, greenhouse gas emissions, recycling, composting, waste management, watershed protection, and so much more. Before that, Mr. Ortiz served in the same capacity in Prince George's for over 6 years, and there he led an even larger Department of Environmental Protection with a bigger budget. So Montgomery County will have to try to address that discrepancy in size. While there, he launched several industry-leading initiatives, and I had to just cut and paste this because I want to make sure I got it right, including the largest organics composting facility on the East Coast, $100 million public-private partnership for green infrastructure and initiatives with faith, nonprofit, and business sectors. He led the state in recycling, waste diversion, and green infrastructure for several years in a row. And before that, he was a 3-term mayor in the town of Edmonston, a small town in Prince George's, a few miles outside of DC. And while the town is small, Mr. Ortiz's tenure was marked by several sequential years of extraordinary flooding, I think 4 in a row. And again, this is a cut and paste to make sure I got it right. He led a 69% reduction in crime over 5 years, doubled revenues, installed a $7 million flood management station ending years of devastating flooding, instituted bilingual services, and built the East Coast's greenest street. The Edmonston Green Street is a national model of sustainability utilizing natural bioretention for polluted stormwater, high efficiency LED lighting, 100% wind power resulting in taxpayer savings, improved water quality for the Anacostia River and Chesapeake Bay, and 50 green jobs with 70% local contracting and 60% minority contracting, excuse me. And before that, Mr. Ortiz was a Soros Criminal Justice Fellow for 3 years. Among other work, he led the strategic national campaign to end the death penalty for minors, culminating in the Supreme Court's Roper v. Simmons to effect that. He was a field director for Carry for President, and for over 2 years, a deputy director at Amnesty International USA. So I think that's probably enough to get us started. So Adam, Mr. Ortiz, welcome to the Women's Democratic Club. The floor is yours, and then we'll move to Q&A.
It's great to be here, Diana. Thank you for that long and well cut and pasted introduction. It was a pleasure. My biggest takeaway is like, man, I'm getting old, but I'm doing my best to age well, and I am doing my best to just continue to do what I can in the roles that I have to work with all of you. And it's just been an honor of mine to be able to remain in this field and to be able to continue public service in different roles. And in each one, I just try to learn from the people that I've had the pleasure and the honor of engaging with along the way, and then take the lessons and then try to share them in my next role. And that's certainly true here at the EPA. It's been 18 months. It's gone really fast, and we're trying to do a lot in a very short period of time. And I'll talk a little bit about that for most of my remarks. But the first thing I want to say is Montgomery County is such a remarkable place, and I know you all know that. I know we all know that, and it was such an honor to serve for those years. In the Department of Environmental Protection. We did some really good things, but what was really special is just how fired up people are in every corner of the county for environmental protection and public health. And it could be Wheaton, it could be Burtonsville, it could be Olney, it could be Sugarloaf, it could be Bethesda, like at every corner, people were fired up about something, whether it's about trees, streams, heat island effect, flooding, equity, inclusion, you name it. So I just, it's just been such an honor and inspiration to have been and continue to be a part of the Montgomery community and among all of you. And as I'm kind of scrolling through the names here on the side, I'm like, oh yeah, great to see you, great to see you, great to see you. Oh, I remember when we talked last. So it's just such an inspiration and keep doing what you're doing. And particularly the Women's Democratic Club, just such a force, so many leaders here, your voice is heard. And I just, want to continue to remain civically engaged and just push for stuff, push for the stuff, that needs attention. And, and I'll, continue to be your ally. So there's so many things to talk about. I almost don't know where to start, but I'll just talk a little bit about what we're working on and share some notes here at EPA, and particularly what we're doing in Region 3. A lot of these things will be sort of familiar to you, but principally, the most important thing that I've learned is that we're only going to be effective if we work in partnership, and I mean partnership, broadly described, and I'll get into a little bit about what I mean about that specifically, but also all levels of government. EPA, and it's funny being in different parts of the region. So just to sort of level set, the region includes Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and then Virginia in the south, and then everything over to the ocean. So Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Delaware. And that's a pretty interesting group of states, super diverse, geographically diverse. So in the West, we have Appalachia, coal country, extraction industries that we're all familiar with. And I've spent a lot of time out there. I'll share some notes because I think that might be of some interest. To Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, politically very deep red place, as we know, just like West Virginia, but I've had remarkable engagements with people there about conservation, stewardship, and climate, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the I-95 corridor, all the historic cities and the suburbs around the metro areas, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Richmond, just tremendous history there. And then the shore, the Delmarva Peninsula, which has its own history. That's the homeland of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and so many other leaders, and also like poultry capital of the world. So there's really a lot of ground that we cover in this relatively compact region, and it's been an honor to kind of get out there based on the experiences I've had in Montgomery County. And as I'm kind of scrolling through, like Diana, your leadership on toxics and plastics and turf and all those concerns, like real, like under your feet public health issues, real stuff, air impacts, climate, the building energy performance standards issue. And Omar, you and I engaged on that, years ago, and glad to have your support. Plastics, Omar, another leader on plastics and straw, like all the things that folks are doing in Montgomery County. I'm so happy to share those notes around recycling. I was in Charleston, West Virginia, and meeting with the mayor there, and she was a really cool lady, Amy Goodman. And she was like, oh, Adam, I was looking through your LinkedIn, and we could really use some help in recycling. I heard that you got the recycling rate up in these counties that you worked in. What'd you do? And I was like, well, let me tell you about it. And there's this guy, Willie Wayner, who runs that division in Montgomery County. You can learn some stuff. And so it's just amazing. Like no matter where I go in the region, people really care about the same stuff. I don't care how red the county is or how blue the county is. Like it's just been remarkable to me to be able to connect with people on so many levels. And to be able
I'm
to
sorry,
share.
let me jump in. Speaking of connections, I want to recognize that Delegate Mary Lehman is in the room, who I think from District 21, who I hope everyone will forgive me, I'll take the liberty of saying has been sponsoring a bill that I care very much about on synthetic turf and getting a chain of custody to prevent the dumping of synthetic turf into our waterways and streams and woods. So welcome, Delegate Lehman. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. And I know, Adam, you've known Mary for a long time as well.
I have. I just had Mary over for refreshments a few nights ago. So, and speaking of allyship, I was, hosting a Latino event in my home And Mary came, and I was like, we got to love our Latino community, but we got to love our allies. And so just thank you to all the allies, however you are, however you're an ally to whomever, we're all in this stuff together. But yeah, great to have you in the room again, Mary. I'm such a fan of yours. And my gosh, so many stuff. Mary has been a leader on getting styrofoam out, on it's just like there's just so much leadership and so many things to learn. So and I also want to be mindful of the time. So Gloria and Diana, how long do you want me to share some remarks for before we go to questions? I want to make sure I don't overstay my welcome.
You're not going to overstay your welcome. Why don't you go for another 10, 12 minutes, and then we'll cut to questions?
All right, great.
Okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
If you get on a roll, keep going.
All right, if the spirit moves me, but I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but yeah, I'll do that. So I'll just, there's so many places to start, but I would just like to share some notes and maybe make some connections about, what we're seeing and hearing in Region 3, covering this really fascinating and diverse, part of our country. So the national priorities for EPA are taking on the climate crisis, and many of you followed a lot of the major investments in climate and renewable energy, advancing environmental justice. So we know that the communities that are often impacted the most by environmental stressors are the ones that are most marginalized, and sometimes that's historic, segregated, or zoning decisions that were disproportionately impacted on people with little means. And sometimes it's like people cannot afford to live anyplace else except by industrial areas or frontline communities. But regardless, of the circumstances, we have a responsibility as leaders to make sure that no matter where you live, what the color of your skin, what language you speak, what zip code you live in, that you have the opportunity to have a healthy life, and your family does as well. So environmental justice is front and center, and we really credit President Biden for being very explicit about that nationally. Closely connected air quality is a big deal. In the previous administration, there was a lot of deference to industry, and industry is important, but we have to keep an eye on industry, and in that, economic development and prosperity and the generation of energy is great, but it can't be done at the expense of people's health. So major investments in air quality related with that, infrastructure. So we're all familiar with the bipartisan infrastructure law, historic events, investments in our aging infrastructure, from water to air to flood resilience, and then finally rebuilding EPA. So on day one, when I showed up, people were like, Adam, I don't know much about you, but I'm so glad you're here, because we know that you really care about the environment and are going to support us. And I'm like, that's my job. My job is to get your back, and to make sure that EPA is strong, and that we grow the next generation of leaders at the agency, and also a diverse series of leaders who truly represent the perspectives of our rich region, regardless of what your background is. We want you here and contributing to the agency. So for Region 3, so there's 10 regions in the United States. I'm Region 3. We are Region 3 of the Mid-Atlantic states. And there's sort of three ways that we're operationalizing those national priorities that I just described. The first one is that we really want to focus on our environmental justice communities. And we live in a time where we have a lot of crises and challenges, and we're familiar with that, but we also have tremendous assets to help us out. One, we've been at this environmental thing structurally, formally, for 50 years, more than 50 years, as the EPA was established, and the major statutes were established in the early 70s. So we're learning stuff, we're smarter than ever, and we also have more engagement with experts in the scientific community, so we're learning more. We also have technology, tremendous advances, of course, in computing and data and mapping, so we're able to be more precise. So we're using that technology, and we've used it to identify the communities that are most distressed environmentally in our region. And there's a handful in Maryland, many in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and others. And I won't go through all of them, but what we're doing is we're trying to develop an interdisciplinary engagement with all those communities to kind of get and undo those very stubborn stressors. So earlier, I was almost late because I was on a call with Ivy City in Washington, DC. And if you're not familiar with Ivy City, It's on New York Avenue or adjacent to New York Avenue. It's where that old Hex warehouse is. And there's a Mom's there. Many of us know and love Mom's, being sort of, hippie part of the political spectrum, healthy food, great place there. But behind that, new development is a community, and there's actually two communities on both sides that have rail yards, asphalt processing, a concrete plant, bus depots, various chemical manufacturers, rail yard switching stations, and communities that have been really impacted. So we've been there, we've walked the streets, and we have some legal authorities, but we also have other ways to undo some of those stressors. So we're engaging with communities to try to figure things out. The second priority that we have is that EPA is a very delegated agency, and that was just by function of when EPA came around. It was established in the 70s, grew in the late 70s, and then was cut in the 80s. But we're a very delegated agency, so we have authorities under the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, etc. But what we do is we delegate those to the states and localities and cities and counties, and say, hey, you guys got to run with the ball here on stormwater management or drinking water or whatever it is, and we're going to keep an eye on you. What we have found is that when there are environmental crises, and we had one in wastewater treatment plant in Baltimore recently, we've had it in chemical plants outside of Pittsburgh and other places. Often those happen because the states don't have the resources to do the inspections and the permitting and the follow-up in a timely way, and they miss stuff. And then bad things don't go corrected soon enough, and then there's the crises. So, the environment is something like people love to talk about, political leaders love to talk about it, but when it comes budget time, often the funds go to the schools, or the funds go to public safety, or the funds go to economic development, and that's important, that's really important. But often the environment doesn't get the resources that it needs to protect public health. So we're leaning into the states to allow us to do more intensive workload assessments of their staff to make sure that they're properly staffed to carry out their work. And I know that's a weedy, geeky kind of thing. It's not the sexiest issue, but it's really important. But I know this is a weedy, geeky audience here tonight, Diana. So, but it's a real thing, because we really count on the states and the cities and the counties to do the work. I mean, you're all engaged in Montgomery County. That Montgomery County, they pick up the trash, they do the recycling, they do the stormwater management. And if if those folks don't have the resources, the technical expertise or assistance to get their job done, then we're failing in the environment. We're not getting there. So EPA is stepping up to make sure that that's getting done. And then the last of the three priorities of us is to really deliver on infrastructure. We have historic amounts of funding. We're digging up lead pipes and replacing them more than ever before. We're really focusing on resilience in our coastal areas and flood-prone areas. And we all know that there's many. Some of them are in the coastal areas, and some of them are in like Rockville, places like that. So we really need to use our money wisely, because we know the climate is changing. We know that people are going to be impacted, and it's going to be disruptive. And some places are more vulnerable than others. So we really want to make sure that those infrastructure investments are where they need to be. So in those three, there's three places geographically we're focused on, and I want to share notes on that with all of you, because I think we're making good progress, but I also welcome any feedback or ideas that you have. Of course, the Chesapeake Bay is the flagship environmental concern in our region. We've been in the news recently just trying to make some changes and correct course, because we have fallen off course among the many states and EPA on getting to the goals that we set out years ago, 2025 restoration goals on the Bay. We're not going to meet those goals as they were envisioned more than 10 years ago. But my role is we're not going to meet them, but how do we accelerate through 2025 and have a realistic trajectory, not just a deadline, but also the resources to be successful in reaching that. So I won't bore you with all the details, but as many of you know, it boils down mostly, not entirely, mostly to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a huge state. In their upstream, as you know, Susquehanna River, Potomac, they all drain into the bay and, through a lot of Montgomery County. And they carry, nutrient loads from mostly farms, not only, but the farms. And what's been tough about Pennsylvania is, they've had political ups and downs where those things are funded and sometimes not, which is why I want to make sure that they're funded properly. But also just the scale is immense. So just to give you a little bit of context, the state of Maryland has approximately 5,500 farms, right? It sounds like a lot. Montgomery has an agricultural tier, as you know. So in Pennsylvania, there's approximately 80,000 farms. In one county alone, Lancaster County, great county. Lancaster is a great city, you should go visit. In just that county alone, they have more farms than Maryland does. So there's a scale issue. And a lot of these farms are smaller. Some of them are Amish farms. So we have cultural and communication barriers as well, and they aren't as regulated. So CAFOs, we talk about CAFOs a lot in the environmental community. CAFOs are actually very highly regulated and lots of oversight, but these smaller farms aren't. So we have a lot of ways that we're working with farmers, and we've made some progress. And I don't want to talk too much about it, but happy to take some of the questions. But we're laser focused on getting the farm community involved, and we've had a lot of success in that. Second geographic area we're really focusing on is West Virginia. And West Virginia is sort of a forgotten part of our region, in my opinion. It's beautiful, as we know, it's wild, it's wonderful, and John Denver sings about it, and many of us sing along because it's such a great state. But a lot of disinvestment. The coal industry, as we know, is on the decline, and the state is struggling to find an economic resource like that, or a series of them. But what is happening is, as there's population loss, there's these old cities there. These cities that had boom times in the 20s and 30s and 40s. One city, the city of Welch, had 100,000 people living in it before 1950, and now there's 17,000 people. So there's a small taxpayer base that can't support the infrastructure, and they have water that's undrinkable. And that's just one example, but there's like literally hundreds of communities like that. So we want to make sure that people out there, also environmental justice communities, are able to drink out of the tap water, make formula for their babies, and take care of their families. So big focus on West Virginia in transitioning coal country, and I'm happy to share notes about that if people are interested. And then Pennsylvania is a big focus. It's upstream from us. Maryland is often suing Pennsylvania because of air impacts or because of water impacts, and we recently settled a lawsuit along those lines, but really engaged in Pennsylvania. And in Gloria, when she was putting together what's the theme here, what can we do, what can we do? And my guidance is this, and these are the principles that I used in Montgomery County and previously, but I'm also using here. Three things: engage, align, and deliver. So engage. So if, for example, Pennsylvania is a source of a lot of pollution, we can try to enforce, but there's no way I can enforce on 80,000 farms. I don't have the legal authority to do it or the people to do it. But maybe I could persuade, maybe I can try to get Pennsylvania to step up in other ways. So I've been engaging. My very first meeting in this job, my very first in-person meeting was with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. I drove up to Harrisburg, 9 o'clock meeting, and I sat down with them, and they're traditionally adversaries and they don't say nice things about us, and a lot of environmentalists don't say nice things about them. But I just showed up there, as like, I don't know you guys yet, but I want to work together. We've got this clean water challenge, we've got lawsuits, and I would love for you guys to be part of the solution. I'm showing up here because I want to help. I want to figure this out. And the response I got from them was, thank you for coming. We want to help too. Nobody's really quite showed up this way before. And actually, we're huge environmentalists. We're huge conservationists. And then the president talked about his no-till practices on his farm. He uses virtually no fertilizers. And then another guy said the same thing in the room. They said, Adam, the problem here is that the state of Pennsylvania doesn't support us like in Maryland. In Maryland, they have a cost share program for small farms to be able to provide conservation on. If you can help us with that, that would be a big deal. And I said, game on, let's go. And then we went to the legislature, Republican House, Republican Senate, very different, Mary Lehman, than what happens in Annapolis. And working with other people, Sarah Elfrith, who some of you may know, we just went up there a lot and we're like, hey, we want to work with you guys. And then we were able to pass the suite of Chesapeake Bay friendly laws in a Republican legislature with overwhelming support, because EPA stood up there with the farmers, traditional adversaries. So that principle of engaging, showing up, building those coalitions with those weird allies, we can make a lot of progress. And then I find that in West Virginia, I'm in the middle of cold country, that like deepest red, like maroon politically places on the East Coast. And I'm, showing up, hey, I'm up in the EPA, don't shoot me, I'm here to help. And what they say is like, we would love your help. We're trying to get our wastewater system under control, because too many of our homes are just using PVC pipes and then like literally flushing directly into the local stream. And we've got this solution, we got that solution, we got this foundation giving us some money, but we could really use some technical expertise. And I'm like, I got technical expertise. And then I brought a team of people down there, and then we got a small grant to do a phase 1 design for a handful of small communities. So this like engagement, I'm just surprised over and over how awesome people are throughout this region, regardless of what their political stripes are. And it's not what you see on CNN or Fox or on the radio. It's just not like that. It's like people are truly engaged and want to work together, on this stuff. So that engagement and the alignment, it's like, okay, let's work together. Let's get the local government, let's get the county government, let's get the state government, let's talk to the governor, let's talk to the president of the Senate, let's talk to the nonprofit group, let's get the pastor on board of the local church. When you align people behind a common mission, you succeed. And I know a lot of you are, always always in front of the county council doing stuff, and that the more allies you bring to that table, and the weirder the allies are, the more diverse they are, the more convincing it is. And that it's just so true, the alignment. And then the delivery, just keeping the eyes on the prize. We want to make a difference in people's lives. We want to make people, be able to like mix formula out of the tap, instead of having to buy bottled water from the store. We want fewer children to suffer from asthma while they're waiting for the school bus. We have got to deliver. That's what people are counting and expecting us to do. So again, I'm mindful of not overstaying my welcome, but I just wanted to share some notes about what we're up to here in Region 3 on your behalf, and some of the things that we think might be working on, how we can figure things out, all the challenges before us environmentally. But I'm grateful to be here, and I just admire so many of you and your leadership over the years.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that wind up. The questions are pouring into my phone and the chat and the Q&A. So I'm going to try to make a little sense of it. The thing that keeps coming up a lot is renewables, cleaning up renewables, woody biomass, and also incinerators in particular. And while there's an incinerator in Montgomery County, the one in Baltimore is surrounded by a very, very underserved, already impacted community. And it has just been a terrible struggle at the state level trying to get that thing closed. What's your view? What's the EPA's approach to supporting communities that are trying to clean up the renewables portfolio from things like woody biomass, the chicken litter, methane, drivers that immediately create more demand for more chicken farms? And then, of course, the incinerators, if you can sort of wrap those up in a neat bow for us.
I'll do my best. I will say that a lot of that is Department of Energy. So I'm not super expert on all of those items, but I'll speak to the ones that I know of and the ones that EPA has a role in. We have to do our best to make responsible choices in our transition away from dirty sources of energy. No question about it. A lot of us were engaged in in how to figure out solar in Montgomery County, and I don't think we quite have it there yet, but we made good steps, and some counties have as well. Wind, offshore wind, major investments in offshore wind to diversify the portfolio and get away from these dirty sources. Some of these renewables we have to keep a really close eye on. So there's, one of the biggest plagues I think of our time is greenwashing. Things that sound good, but upon closer inspection don't quite turn out to be as sustainable as they can be. So we have to listen to the science and have to do our due diligence and have to look to people who are providing energy solutions for a track record that's verifiable. And when I was in the role in Montgomery County, and even before in Prince George's, we were approached all the time by vendors about some product or some technology, or we got the best way to take care of your waste or whatever it is. And upon further examination, there's a lot of snake oil out there. So we really have to be thoughtful about it. Regarding the incinerator issues, I dealt with that issue, as many of you know, and I tried to be I was as transparent as absolutely possible, that the waste issues period are really hard. There's always a cost, always a trade-off, because we are overwhelmed with disposable material in this consumer society. So what are the best ways to handle it? It's a tough one. Of course, we have to recycle and divert as much as possible, but as a lot of what people think are often recyclable, or what the industry says are recyclable, are not really recyclable. And we might send it to Shady Grove, but then there are people picking that stuff off, and then about 50% or so of that stuff ends up going to the incinerator in the county, because it's actually trash. What the conclusion I've come to, and EPA, it's consistent with EPA's, is that you have to make the best decisions you can looking at a variety of factors. So all of us, no matter where we live, bear some environmental burden. There's cars, there's emissions, and we just have to make sure that communities don't bear more than their fair share. So on the incinerator issue, I think location is really key. We have to be mindful of cumulative impacts of certain communities, and there are concerns with all of them that are in metropolitan areas.
But is there a role for the EPA within that, for example, the specific question of the incinerator? And I understand that this really overlaps with the Department of Energy, but can you explain a little bit more about how EPA can maybe help, or how we can help EPA drive that? I think what a lot of people on here are looking for is your specific advice on how to engage most productively.
Sure. Well, the authorities that we have are under the Clean Air Act to make sure that emissions meet permit limits, and the permit limits are set by national attainment standards. So what is the amount of emissions that a community can responsibly bear? And for each user, each discharger, they have certain limits that they have to stay under. Some incinerators or factories are more sophisticated than others. And one of the things that we're doing now is increasing our standards. And in the last 2 weeks, we've issued new standards for power plants as well as cars to make sure that they're reducing their emissions. The tough thing about the incinerator issue is, okay, if not the incinerator, then what? Then a landfill. Okay, where is that landfill, and what's the impact of the landfill? And what we know with landfills is are the fugitive emissions of methane. And even capped landfills, and I oversaw the landfill in Prince George's County for 6 years. Even a capped landfill that harvests the methane is still very leaky. And I'll just share a personal / professional anecdote. We were really proud of that landfill in Prince George's County. It's capped, there's methane wells, and the methane is harvested and actually powers the county jail. And we would take people on tours, and and we had the composting facility, these pretty sophisticated facilities. Then Senator Paul Pinsky called me one day and he said, "Adam, are you aware of the University of Maryland study about the landfill?" And I was like, "No, I haven't heard about it." He's like, "Oh, well, I'm going to connect you with a professor there. They just did a concerning study about the landfill." And sure enough, we had the research team over to the office. They gave a presentation, and it turns out that that landfill is by far the largest greenhouse gas emitter in that part of our state because of methane. That was very humbling, for me as an environmentalist, because it had this incredible technology. And then, so anyway, I leave Prince George's to go to Montgomery County. And then in Montgomery County, we have this terrible incinerator. It's a terrible thing. And there's, lots of terrible things about waste disposal, but it's tough. Is there an emission? Yes, there's absolutely, of course, an emission. Is it regulated and permitted and inspected? Yes, it is. Does it suck that we have to burn our waste? Yes, it absolutely does. But the alternatives, and I spent 3 years looking at alternatives, the alternatives are, okay, you're better in this way, but you're worse in that way. So that's why, Diana, what I said is that location is really important. That facility doesn't have a lot of other impacts around it. The air quality in the northwest corner of Montgomery County is very, very clean. Perhaps the
Compared
cleanest.
to Baltimore, compared to the incinerator in Baltimore and the health of the community in Baltimore.
Yeah, but even in Montgomery County, the dirtiest parts of Montgomery County are Silver Spring and Bethesda.
Air quality?
Air quality, yeah. So it's these are just tough decisions, and what we say is we have to make mindful decisions, and that we're not overburdening anybody anywhere with where we put these
and I guess we're all victims of inertia. So the Baltimore community has the incinerator, and the process of deciding where to move such a thing, whether it's landfill or another incinerator, is so politically fraught that they're kind of stuck with it until we find a way to, I think this is kind of obvious, but I just really like to remind people the only way out of this fundamentally is to divert as much waste as possible. And so that's where, for example, I hope EPA is doing important work on composting, since 30% of our waste stream is food waste, organic, waste. So that would be a huge reduction in what needs to go up the pipes. Let's pull back a little. If you could talk to two pieces of the same question, I think. Where is Pennsylvania now in terms of its impact on the Chesapeake Bay? And I read in the Post, Maryland is poised to achieve its goal of 100% clean energy by 2035, positioning us at the forefront of states taking action on climate change. And my question was, how are the other states in Region 3 doing compared to Maryland on that?
Maryland is way ahead. The other states, this isn't quite my lane, so I want to be careful that I don't misrepresent anything or anybody. The new administration in Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro, is taking a new look at how to achieve those goals. I was just talking to their secretary earlier today. The last governor signed them up for RGGI, so folks may be familiar with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Reduction Initiative, but that's being challenged in court. Maryland is out in front, and I'll just be honest, people count on Maryland. So all of you keep pushing Maryland to do great things and set the way. On the Chesapeake Bay question, big strides on Pennsylvania. Still the vast majority of pollution and the biggest gap in meeting our goals is coming from Pennsylvania. They're the farthest behind. But if you can, I'll try to express this in a way that makes sense. But the most progress percentage-wise in pollution reduction has also come from Pennsylvania, because they've been doing more on farms. So they're coming faster, but their gap is like huge. Where we've been leaning in is on these small farms. So we working with leaders in Pennsylvania. We passed 3 big pieces of legislation last year, or they rather, which I think we'll see a lot of acceleration. The first is they stood up a cost share program for small farms, which doesn't sound that interesting or dramatic, but it actually is, because these, getting controls on these farms is really the way we make progress. Secondly, they funded it. They have about $250 million into that fund for a first phase. And I was just in Harrisburg last week, and they've committed $150 million of those dollars to projects already. So that's really exciting. That's a major step forward. And they also passed a bill limiting the potency of fertilizers. So that's also a big deal. So they're making the right steps to catch up. Also, folks may have read late last week or earlier in the week that we reached a settlement with a handful of terms with the states that had sued EPA. And you can read all the details, but it commits us to a level of effort that we've been at higher enforcement, what I call tough love. In Pennsylvania, we've done a lot more enforcement of wastewater treatment plants, factories, as well as farms in Pennsylvania. And we're going to maintain that level of effort. And we also developed a team that's actually going to strategically go to farms that we think are disproportionately polluting and to get them into control programs. So that's a lot of weeds. So Pennsylvania is making progress, but they still have a big gap. But we're just really excited that now we have everybody on board up there, which is actually a huge breakthrough.
This is one that I actually take great interest in, but other people are asking too. PFAS, these per and polyfluoroalkyl substances that are like Teflon and the forever chemicals I think we're all hearing about, and dental floss and makeup and all kinds of lubricants and waterproof. What is the strategy for limiting exposure, limiting the addition of more PFAS, cleaning up water? I gather there's, other than a couple small bench trials at some universities, there's really no method yet, no industrial scale method for cleaning PFAS out of water. And I just want to add, the city of Poolesville, which is on wells, has 13 municipal wells, and they just had to close 2 of only 13 wells because all of them had PFAS, but 2 had excessive PFAS. And of course, now your agency is saying there's almost no safe level at all in drinking water.
Yeah, we're delivering some unpleasant news in the short time I've been on here. And that's, I say that joke in jest, but that there's science, we have to follow the science, and we have to get the science out there. And the law will catch up to the science, and the technology will catch up to the science in time. So we have delivered, just kind of like tough facts on PFAS, as well as ethylene oxide and other emerging contaminants based on the science. PFAS is a significant challenge for our society. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in our houses. It's in our homes. It's in the ground. It's in some of our drinking water sources. So where we've started at EPA, and this is a work in progress, and it will take a while. And we're in close conversation with the utilities, WSSC in our area, as well as all the state regulators. Is we're starting with drinking water. So we've issued health advisories for what I don't want to say safe level, but what a realistic level is. This is what we call risk communication. Telling people that something is dangerous, be mindful. And we've also issued tough new standards for drinking water systems, drinking water providers, and the technology is not quite there yet. But we wanted to set the marker out there as the first place to start. I saw in the comments about consumer products. We're not quite there yet for advice or guidance on consumer products. What I would say is that's it's a risk communication. We want people to do their homework and make the best decisions that they can when they're at the grocery store and what they bring home and what we put in our homes and our bodies. But EPA has taken a pretty significant step on the drinking water side. We've done a lot of cleanups also in Superfund, so people are familiar with Superfund, these massive sites, trying to take out as much. We've identified, we have pretty high certainty. We have identified pretty much all the places we think that there are PFAS in our Superfund sites, and those are priorities for our cleanup efforts. But yeah, we're off on a good foot, but we've got many steps to go, Diana.
I think the company 3M, which is one of the major manufacturers of PFAS, has said that they will stop manufacturing it by 2025, which tells you how alarmed they are about the science, since it's a major profit center for them. And if folks are not aware, one of the highest hotspot contamination points for PFAS are fire stations and airports, because they run big efforts to drill for firefighters there. And the foam, as well as the turnout gear that the firefighters wear, is just loaded with PFAS because it works beautifully to put out flames. So it's going to be tough going. And of course, it's in artificial turf. So another reason not to roll it across our land. Speaking of putting things across the land, how about train derailments?
Oh, what do you want to know?
Well, are you going to protect Montgomery County from any dangerous trail derailments? I was up county near Dickerson today, and of course the train goes barreling through 40 or 50 cars. I have no idea. It could be cows, could be, whatever it was that spilled in East Palestine.
Yeah, I'll admit this is an area that wasn't quite on my radar, Diana, before February 3rd. But I've learned a lot in supporting my counterpart who covers Ohio. Rail safety, and that's a little bit more that's obviously Department of Transportation and some other agencies more than it's us. But it's interesting. If you'll indulge me for a second, been out to East Palestine a couple times, and I'll be out there on Wednesday in supporting the counties in Pennsylvania. So I mentioned earlier in the call that the derailment occurred 872 feet from the Pennsylvania line, which is less than 2 square blocks. And of course, the stormwater runoff and the contamination and the plume, when the material was combusted, went over Pennsylvania. So there was definitely an impact there. So I've been out there and working closely with health professionals and the local officials in Beaver County. And there's a little town called Darlington, which is right across the line from East Palestine. So the good news is that there's a playbook for EPA responding to disasters like that and derailments. This is actually my 3rd derailment in the 18 months I've been here. I didn't know that they happened as often as they do, but they do. So there's a playbook on containment, on testing, air monitoring, public notification.
Did that get followed? Because my impression anyway is that there was some pushback from the local or state authorities. And I thought EPA was sort of told, yeah, no thanks, and then yelled at for not having come to the rescue. And it seems like that 2-day burn, quote, planned burn, was maybe not the best idea.
The burn occurred before we took legal control of the situation. So it was by the book. There's lessons learned, and locals, and it couldn't be any other way. The locals are there first, and they have to make real-time decisions first. So I don't want to second guess too much what occurred, and I'm not quite an expert on this method of disposal versus another in an emergency situation like that. So I want to be careful about over speaking. But having been on the ground, what was interesting in East Palestine, because a variety of things occurred that had not occurred in other derailments. So that particular mix of contaminants in one place was something that was a little different than what had been reported to me. So that created different effects as different things mixed. That controlled burn, again, I'm kind of new to this, so I don't want to overspeak, is very unusual to occur, and continues to raise questions about it. But as I got there and I met with the frontline responders, I met with our online on-scene coordinators, and we have many that are always at facilities like that. I was like, so what happened? So how do you respond? And every car has a code, and there's legislation to make it clearer. And then all emergency responders carry around this book. So that's what I was reaching for a minute ago. And what this is like an inventory of all the chemicals and all the codes that appear on the side of a rail car. So, so that gave me a little bit of comfort that people, aren't completely clueless or don't have an easy way to figure out, what might be leaking, in an incident like that. So there is a book that's followed. but sometimes situations create new contingencies that have never been experienced before. So that gave me some comfort. Interestingly, one of the derailments was over the Allegheny River in Western Pennsylvania, and 9 rail cars fell off a bridge into the river. And that's obviously very dramatic, but there wasn't a combustion, there wasn't a community nearby, and it was hard for the media to get there. It was just like a remote place, and it was contained and cleaned up, and we tracked the plume through the water until it was dispersed. We closed off the inlets to drinking water sources along the way, and it was managed. But yeah, East Palestine was something different. But anyway, I kind of give you this sort of rambling response, Diana, to hopefully express that there is a playbook and people do respond and they are on the ground. Sometimes things are not expected, but but everybody involved, the senators in both of those states, as well as the national safety organizations and agencies, are taking a look at everything even more to make sure that all of our crossings in our communities are safe.
I feel like this is one of those moments where states' rights, red states tend to say, get the regulators out of our hair until a train goes off the rails, and then suddenly, where's the federal help? And one thing I've noticed in various maps of the IRA, the new Biden environmental bill, is that the bulk of the money is going to red states, which sort of almost locks them into supporting green jobs, green infrastructure. It was just stunning to me, the difference in the number of dollars flowing to red versus blue states. Sometimes it's a little frustrating, but I think it's probably wise. A final question for you really is trying to pull together multiple comments. You guys, by the way, are terrible at putting things in Q&A, but very good at putting them in the chat to everyone. I think they're trying to make sure you see it. Really, just we can't recycle our way out of this. We can't compost our way completely out of this. It's got to be a reduction in consumption. But in a country whose economy is built on consumption and economic growth, how much trouble do you face politically, trying to tell people, buy less food, figure out if you need that before you throw away the old one, the fast fashion issues, the amount of plastic that goes to single use. I've got one statistic here, and then I'd like to just throw the question to you. In the early 1960s, at the dawn of the plastics revolution, less than 500,000 tons of plastic were produced each year. Today, it's more than 380 million tons, nearly half of which is for single-use items. So your plastic fork, your plastic cup, your plastic straw. So what's EPA going to do about all that waste?
You're talking about this is my love language, Diana. How to reduce plastics and waste. So thank you. Like, this means a lot to me. And so my quick bureaucratic answer, and then I'll give you sort of a deeper Adam answer. Quick bureaucratic answer is that there's a plastic strategy that the agency is working on, and actually in coordination with other countries around the world. This is actually a major topic of conversation at the State Department. Plastics pollution and control of waste for obvious reasons. Since the oceans are kind of a big deal and full of plastic. There's a comment period open right now, and this is like one of those weedy things that go totally under the radar that are actually huge. Is there's a comment period now for the Federal Trade Commission's Green Guide. And you're like, wow, this is even more boring, Adam, than when you started talking about this 10 seconds ago. But this is why this is important to your concern, Diana. So Federal Trade Commission is involved in consumer protection and labeling, and like what's on your label is what you're getting. One of the, I don't try and think of an artful way to say this, but I think one of the sloppiest regimes of labeling is the recycling regime of labeling. And some of you might remember in Montgomery County, we banned number 6 plastics, whether they're styrofoam or rigid. And I know that's also Mary Layman's love language. But we did that because even though it had the recycling symbol on it, number 6s are not recyclable in any normal way. Like maybe in a university laboratory, perhaps, but not curbside. So that standard being as sloppy and as it is, and that the recycling symbol is slapped on everything, it creates so many other contingencies in the waste stream. So so I would ask folks to weigh in. If you can't meet the deadline is this week, but there'll also be other comment periods. But you may want to track that and weigh in to take away the greenwashing.
So we will put that in our follow-up note. I'll track you down and get the link or whatever input you have, and we'll make sure to put that in our follow-up note to all of you who are here, and I hope you'll share it out. That's exactly the kind of specific material we're looking for. Thank you. Oh, Scott just put it in. Thank you, Scott.
And I'll just say one more thing, like I'm representing EPA tonight, so I haven't said anything about candidates or political parties or, you know, Adam's personal views on too many things, but but I would say, like, the consumer, you know, waste stream is huge, and the population continues to grow, and manufacturers are, you know, always innovating, getting more stuff, fast fashion, you know, all sorts of disposable stuff. But, you know, I think the special sauce is the waste stream itself can be sustainable. I think it's hard to change human nature to not consume more as things become cheaper and more affordable. But if someday in the future, you know, everything that we buy on the shelf can, you know, compost in our backyard, or, you know, be easily and efficiently and cost effectively recycled at Shady Grove, or, you know, whatever municipal systems, we will go a long way to controlling, you know, all the externalities with the trash. And you know, so, you know, turning our disposables truly into 100% recoverables and zero, like legitimately zero trash, you know, is the way to go. We're not there soon, but I don't think it's rocket science. People are pretty smart when we want to be. And but I think these green guides are a big step, because also what I've heard is, you know, and I've talked to industry a lot. I've talked to Coca-Cola, talked to Pepsi, I talked to a lot of these big companies all the time in my engagement thing. And all of them are saying, our people want sustainable products. They're not that cost effective. You know, Bob over in accounting hates it, but we want the sustainable product. But if we can make sure that the product that's labeled sustainable is truly sustainable, then we'll really get somewhere.
Great. Well, I think that's almost a hopeful note. And I congratulate you on finding one. I've got a couple of replies to that, but we're going to let you go on a hopeful note. Adam, thank you so very much for giving us your time tonight. And I know everybody out here was following the chat, and we look forward to having you back to check in and see how you're feeling about things, and give us lots of good news on the work that you're doing for all of us. So thank you on behalf of the residents of Region 3.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you. There's actually lots of great news. I was just, you know, this is the tough stuff that we work on, because the tough stuff is the stuff on our plates, but there's lots of great things. But yeah, again, I appreciate everybody's engagement. Montgomery is such a special place, and the activist community is special on top of special. So I'm always happy to come and hang out, and don't live too far away. So please keep inviting me.
We will take you up on it, and we'd love to have you in person once we start doing more of those events as well. So thank you very much. Before everybody runs away, I've got a couple quick things I want to add. I wanted to recognize from the Central Committee, Cece Grant and Mark Anthony Robles for joining us. And also Eden Durbin is out there in TV land for Delegate Jared Solomon from District 18. And also Greg Wims has been appointed to fill the vacancy in District 39, a longtime friend of mine. And I think many of you probably know Greg, so congratulations to him. And I also wanted to thank people who often go unthanked, which is our communications team, specifically the chair, Lisa Fuller, and our newsletter editor, Millie Khan, as well as her helpers, Bonnie Chernikoff, Allison Bennett, who also runs our social media, Holly Sirakos, who puts together all of our slides that you get to admire every time we have different speakers, longtime supporter and tech guy, Scott Weber, and new to the team is Michael Tardif. So thank you, Michael, for joining us, and congratulations on a well-run maiden voyage. So I wanted to make sure to thank you. And let's go to wrap up. We just want to remind you of a couple of different events that are coming up. I think the next one is our May 7th, the May 7th happy hour, and that's going to be in North Potomac. We would love to have you join us. And as I think we mentioned earlier, we're going to have a number of elected officials there, including the Legislative Women's Caucus. So that's www.womensdemocratic.club.org, and come talk to your favorite elected officials and tell them how to fix the problems that are bothering you. And then on May 10th, we're going to have Representative David Trone from District 6, as I mentioned. And then June 14th will be the education of the WDC community on the significance of Juneteenth. And then a late June biannual meeting for us. So thank you to the Latino Democratic Club for co-sponsoring tonight's event and promoting it with us. And I think that's a wrap. We're going to save the chat. We will try to follow up. And thank you all very much for coming and for staying tonight.